Thank you. I'm so short, it doesn't really make a difference if I sit or stand, so I'm going to move around a little bit so you know that I'm not sitting. I was born now almost about 50 years ago, and my wife is in the audience almost 50 years ago, I said, not exactly. And when I was born, and I was born in Iran, Tehran, and where I was born, almost my prosperity, I found out half a century later, depended so much on the microeconomics of the family in which I was born and the macroeconomics of my country. Actually, if you look at our generation, my generation, people who were born in the 1960s, so much of our prosperity was defined by which side of the Berlin Wall we were born. If you were born in communist Russia in the 60s or in Mao's China, you were not going to do as well as the guy in the United States, Canada, or Western Europe. Bill Gates once said a genius in Beijing will not have done as well as an ordinary person in Baltimore. I'm also father of 3 very young children. And I look at these children and I ask the same question. What is the big macroeconomic trend that is going to decide their prosperity? And the answer is where Britain sits in global trade. And as you know, for the last few decades, we haven't done so well. We've been carrying a deficit, and the result of that has been a direct loss of our place in Global Prosperity League. We today rank 28, 1 place ahead of Greece. And what's bad news, the good news, is that if you look at what we just finished in Britain, which I am very proud of, the Olympics that we hosted, look at what Team GB did. Our economic prosperity line and our position in the global Olympics ranking almost went hand in hand for a very long period of time. In 1996, we won 1 single gold, we came 36, we had 15 medals. And then we came back and we started thinking strategically rather than wishfully, and we changed the way we deliver Olympics and the way we do our sports. By 2004, we won 30 medals, we were 10th. By 2008, a tiny country of 60 million people in Britain, we came 4th. All the countries above us had at least 5 to 10 times our population. This time, 2012, we came 3rd. We got 65 medals. So what is it that Britain PLC, UK PLC, can learn from Team GB? And in that, I think there's 4 things. And I'm going to list the first 3, but I'm going to dwell on the last. First, we need to start thinking strategically rather than wishfully about where our resources should be. Where is it that Britain is already on the podium and we can compete globally better than others can? Financial, business services, clearly, management consultancy, clearly, but also creative industries, also scientific industries, where we already are either on the podium or can be on the podium. Healthcare, education, there's no global leaders there. Why can we not be providers of healthcare to the world? Why can we not create the Vodafones of healthcare, of education? Secondly, we need to re-engineer those things out of what we can hardly afford ourselves into what the rest of the world needs. I was in a conference recently speaking in Dubai, and like most things Dubai does, there was 5,000 people from all parts of that middle part of the world, Central Asia, Middle East, Africa, buying healthcare. It was me, because I'm, as you can see, particularly short, particularly ugly, and they just needed somebody like that. There was people from Cleveland Clinic, Mayo Clinic, a few other big names in the West, but there was 50, 60 speakers from the East. That middle part of the world has already decided they're going to buy their healthcare from the East. Why? Because there's a company in India, Aravind, who does cataract for £50. And their results as good as what we do. And we do it for £1,000. So they haven't cut us by 5%, 10%, 20%. They re-engineered the model. And they got 95% less than we do. I saw that again, as a child growing on the streets of Tehran, I saw the death of the British car manufacturing or the Western car manufacturing at the time. When I saw in the 60s and 70s, everybody was driving Western cars. And all of a sudden, late 70s, early 80s, all you saw was Japanese cars. And in Dubai, that day I saw that unless we do something with healthcare, we can't do that. Thirdly, we need to start getting out of our comfort zone. We do more trade in Britain with Ireland than we do with Russia, India, China, Brazil put together. Put together, not separately. Why is that? That's because people like me, and I'm not one, but the captains of the industry, the captains of our political spectrum, they're people at my age. And in my formative years, the developing countries were responsible for no more than 10% of the global GDP. So people kind of ignored it. 10 years ago, 15 years ago, they were 20% of the world GDP. Today, they're 43% of the world GDP. By the end of this decade, they will be the majority of the world GDP. They are 85% of the global growth. That's where we need to go. But if we go there, and that's the bit I want to focus on, what kind of business are we going to promote? By the way, I'm kind of don't know, so tell me, give me a shout when I got 5 minutes. I'm just making it up as I go. So when I go there, what kind of business do we want to promote? As the rest of the world comes out of poverty, they start thinking about the global values in which we all believe. They start thinking about equity, fairness, freedom, the universal values in which we all believe. And when the rest of the world is trying to sell them products, we live in a world that is characterized by overcapacity of products. We should be focusing on not just being companies, but causes with which they can identify. In Britain, we have become fantastically good at answering the what and the why, and the what and the how question of business. What products, what services are we going to produce? How are we going to make them more efficient, more affordable? But we have sometimes forgotten about the why question of our enterprises. Why do we do what we do? What are the values, the principles that we want to leave behind, that we advocate? When the Puritans left Britain in 1630 because of, I'm not going to call it persecution because you might disagree with it religiously, but when they left, they created one of the very first capitalist companies in Britain. They issued shares. As you know, the history of the Puritans and the history of capitalism goes hand in hand. Francis Bacon, Weber, and they created one of the very first stock market companies. And they sold shares in order to raise money, in order to buy 190 ships to get tens of thousands of people to New England. And do you know what they wrote in the prospectus as their objective? They wrote, we're going to create so much value to give fantastic return to our shareholders, 1. 2, we're going to create the kingdom of God on earth. Massimo Massari Ubuka, the founder of Sony, in 1945, sat in the hollowed-out remnants of a department store in bombed-out Tokyo and created Sony. And you know what's the first thing he did? He didn't write a business plan. He didn't even know what products he's going to have. The very first thing he did was to write the prospectus of Sony. And in there, he said, we're going to create a company that would bring the ingenuity of the Japanese engineers to bring our country out of this mess, to reinvent our country and deploy technology to solve the problems of the people of the world. Anthony Watson, the man who saw the growth of IBM to one of the world's largest companies after the Second World War, said that in his retirement essay, said the thing that made IBM most successful was not the products and services they provided, but was the beliefs that its employees held, was the causes that united its people. And the more they stuck to those causes, the more successful they became. And his advice to his successors was, don't forget those beliefs. IBM did for a period and went very badly wrong. It came back. Martin Luther King said, I have a dream. He didn't say, I have a business plan. So what is our dream? When we get up in the morning and go to work and try to do what we need to do, what is the world we want to change? And in my view, we need to focus on three things, whatever business we're in. First, we need to remember, we need to shed away this idea that we are only there to make our owners richer. Sam Walton, who created Walmart, became the richest man in the world, and his family still, decades after his death, are the richest people in the world, had a fantastic story that he wrote in his autobiography as before he was dying. He said one day he was in an analyst presentation with a group of Wall Street law, and this eminent analyst asked him, Mr. Walton, I have gone to your shop, I analyzed what you do, and I have seen you sell this chair for $14.20. Your competitors sell it for $20, you should sell it for $17, you're 15% of your competitors, you'll do a lot more money for shareholders. And you know what he said? He said, it depends whose agent do you think I am. If I'm the agent of my shareholders, you're absolutely right, that's what I should do. But I believe I'm the agent of my customers. And therefore, my job is to buy something from them as high quality as I can, as cheaply as I can, add the least amount of reasonable profit I can onto it to sustain me, and then pass it on. He did not that badly, did he? And George Merck, who created Merck, who became one of the global drug companies, used to say, healthcare is for people, not for profit. The more we remember that, the more we serve the people, the more we serve the people, the more they rewarded us with their custom, the more profit we made. And that's the right way of looking at whatever you do in life. We are, above all else, agents of our customers. And as we go global, we need to make sure people understand what it is that we stand for our customers. Secondly, is that if you want to do something amazing, you can't do it on your own. You need a large group of people, and you need a large group of great people to do great things. And therefore, in any company, everybody matters. We need to shed away this orthodoxy in Britain that the only people that matter are those who are at the very top, or the owners. Everybody matters. If I take my phone out and I take a picture of you, whose picture are you going to look at? You're going to look at your own picture. The longest and hardest, because to you, you're the person who matters most. So if you're going to ask our people to do something extraordinary every day they come to work, we need to value them but the best way we can. In our case, I believe you have to give people ownership. And the reason I believe people need to have ownership in the enterprises in which they work, look at the kind of society we created in Britain. A single square mile in the City of London and a single square mile in Whitehall control 93% of all our assets, productive assets, 93%. What's the result of that? In Germany, partnerships, families, small businesses, they own about 40% of the productive assets. And look at the difference. The difference is that in Germany, the poorest part of Germany is 2 times poorer than the richest part of Germany. In France, that's 4 times. In America, that's 5 times. In China, that's 8 times. In Britain, that's a shameful 10 times. We need to change the way we own assets. We need to go from a country of mass ownership of homes to the mass ownership of the enterprises in which we work, so we can control it for the good long term of those enterprises. And I finish with my third principle. Jim Collins used to say the opposite of great is not bad, is good. Because we don't have sometimes great hospitals because what we have is good enough. We don't have great schools because what we have is good enough. Many of us in our lives, we don't have great lives because our lives are good enough. When we run into a crisis, so many change so fundamentally what they do. In Britain, we need to become more ambitious. We need to stop the mediocrity that tells us keep your feet firmly on the ground and your head well away from the clouds. To do something extraordinary in life, you just need to keep your feet off the ground from time to time and your head well into the clouds. You need to do that. You need to do all of what I said in order to redefine Britain. We need to redefine the productive engines of Britain to get out there, but to get out there not as another country that wants to sell those people another product, but as a country that wins people's hearts and minds, that sells the values in which Britain should be identified with. Most of you in here are significantly younger than me. It's the job of my generation to start that. It's the job of your generation to make sure that by the time it gets to my children's generation, British PLC is as successful as Team GB. Thank you so much for listening to me.